a.m. CBS News, I'm Charles Osgood. The Space Shuttle Discovery is poised for liftoff at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Weather problems forced NASA to scrub the takeoff yesterday, but now, as Steve Young reports, all systems are go.
The countdown, now less than 15 minutes from scheduled liftoff, came out of a planned hold a quarter hour ago and is continuing to click along smoothly. The astronauts have been perched inside Discovery now for about 90 minutes. For Commander Rick Houck, Joe Allen, and Dale Gardner, the 8-day mission will be their second flight. Dr. Anna Fisher and pilot Dave Walker are the rookies. A sailboat this morning blundered into a proscribed area near the launch site, potentially interfering with one of the abort maneuvers. The boat has been cleared away. Since dawn, about an hour ago, clouds have been heavier than yesterday, but pose no problem. And high-altitude winds, which caused a scrub yesterday, have abated. So everything continues to look okay. Steve Young, CBS News, Kennedy Space Center, Florida. Wildly swerving air boundaries might have torn shuttle to bits. This morning, though, the weather is much better. Cloud cover here in Florida seemed a problem for a while, but that's now improving as well. And the countdown has been proceeding almost without a snag. About 12 minutes ago, there was a minor problem with one of the consoles, but that cleared up and the countdown proceeded. If you count the spacecraft itself, this flight features 4 veterans and 2 rookies. The spacecraft Discovery has flown once before, so have 3 of the crew members, Commander Rick Houck and mission specialists Joe Allen, a scientist astronaut, and Dale Gardner. The rookies are Dave Walker, the pilot, and Dr. Anna Fisher, mission specialist, physician, and mother. And that's a first. The Russians have had 2 female cosmonauts, but Dr. Fisher is destined to become the first mother in space. Her daughter, Kristen Ann, was born a year and 4 months ago. 4 of the crew members are strapped in on the deck. Dale Gardner is on the middeck, one lone astronaut, as he called himself a while ago. It's his first day. Harris in the last minute explaining some of the technical details in the final minutes of flight.
51A.
These final moments are technical talk, mainly having to do with switching to internal systems in the spacecraft instead of electronic equipment on the ground.
Minus 1 minute, 15 seconds with the liquid hydrogen tank now at flight pressure.
While the shuttle was in darkness this morning, the scene here was something like a Hollywood gala with brilliant spotlights trained on Discovery. Puffy clouds above now and a mostly blue sky. The American flag behind the outdoor countdown clock is fluttering in a breeze, which is ground level is pretty gentle with 55 seconds to go.
Orbiter's engines have been armed. These devices are used to ensure that any hydrogen flowing through the engines does not accumulate.
The main purpose of this mission is twofold: launch 2 communication satellites, bring back 2 others for refurbishment and relaunch.
From the ground computer.
The shuttle out there on the launch complex is an ungainly, even an unlikely bird. The orbiter Discovery perched on the side of a huge external fuel tank. Either side of Discovery, 2 solid rocket boosters. They're the main source of horsepower in the first minutes of flight, with 23 seconds to go.
Now controlling the final seconds. T-minus 20 seconds, Mark.
The crew is lying atop a virtual bomb. The liquid hydrogen and oxygen are used to power the free window. That amounts to a controlled explosion. Let's hear the count.
Go for main engine start. 7, 6. We have main engine start. 3, 2, 1, and liftoff.
And liftoff. The 3 engines and then the side strap boosters. A brilliant orange light is illuminating the cloud, the plume beneath the rocket, which is now penetrating the cloud deck up above. About a quarter of the sky is in clouds. Our building now is beginning to shake with the roar of these engines. A 4.5 million pound spacecraft being borne aloft by 7 million pounds of thrust, rattling the windows of the control room here.
67%.
Our microphones and clocks rattling in the morning light. The spacecraft is now obscured and now again is appearing between the banks of clouds. The tracking cameras of NASA up above are getting a view that we can't now from the moment. On the ground, spectators looking across the lagoon at the plume of smoke which is wafting across the launch pad. They are now at the point of maximum thrust, 1 minute into the flight.
Dynamic pressure.
Those side straps solid fuel engines are providing the main thrust now.
Back to 104%, the nominal throttle setting for this mission.
Those engines will burn for about another 45 seconds, and then the three main engines on the spacecraft will take over.
Discovery Houston, your go at throttle up. Roger, go. Discovery's crew given a go at throttle up, velocity 3,400 feet per second, altitude 12 nautical miles, downrange distance 8 nautical miles.
And those words, Roger, go, the first words from the crew in flight. The NASA long-range cameras are continuing to track the spacecraft, which is pretty much hidden from our view now, as the morning sunlight peers through those clouds and the smoke continues to obscure the launch complex.
Feet per second, altitude 18 nautical miles, downrange distance 16 nautical miles. Coming up on SRB separation in about 15 seconds.
SRB separation, the solid rocket boosters, they'll have spent their fuel, they'll be tossed aside, they'll go about 120 miles downrange, they'll be plucked from the ocean by ships waiting there to be brought back for refurbishment and reuse. On the long-range cameras now, we can see the spacecraft, and everything is proceeding smoothly with the launch of Discovery. We'll return for updates as they're necessary. I'm Steve Young, CBS News, Kennedy Space Center, Florida. And
three engines still running 104%, about 1 more minute on their run time for this launch. Engines throttling back to maintain 3 Gs. Engines at about 91-92% of their rated thrust. Velocity 23,600 feet per second, altitude 58 nautical miles, downrange distance 675 nautical miles. Engines throttled now to 75%, down to 65, maintain 3 Gs. We got Echo 25-7 up at today. We copy. Normal main engine cutoff confirmed. 8 minutes, 50 seconds. Main engines now cut off. Velocity is 25,600 feet per second. External tank separation confirmed. Status check and mission control. Discovery Houston, nominal ohms 1 targets. EPU shut down on time. Okay, nominal and on time.
The Discovery shuttle's off on its salvage mission in space. Sandinistas won't say what is in the boxes on that ship from Russia. Good morning, this is Reid Collins with the CBS World News Roundup. The shuttle Discovery is off on its retrievers mission to return 2 crippled satellites to Earth. The story from the Cape this morning and Steve Young.
after being delayed today by high-altitude wind shear, Space Shuttle Discovery roared off the pad this morning into the Florida sky precisely on time.
We have main engine start. 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of Discovery.
There was a great plume of gray smoke which wafted out across the lagoon toward spectators. Getting an up-close view were the crew of 5, Commander Rick Houck, pilot Dave Walker, and mission specialists Joe Allen, Anna Fisher, and Dale Gardner, whose birthday this is, his 36th. They have their work cut out for them over the next 8 days. In the cargo bay are 2 satellites which they are scheduled to put into orbit for Canadian Communications Company and for the U.S. Defense Department, so its ships, planes, and fixed military installations can stay in touch. And for the first time ever, astronauts will attempt to retrieve satellites, 2 of them which wound up in useless orbits when they were launched. If they succeed, those satellites will be brought back for refurbishment, resale, and, it is hoped, relaunch. Steve Young, CBS News, Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
CBS News, I'm Richard C. Hawkins.
In from Cape Canaveral launch pad on a pillar of white fire this morning to begin an 8-day mission in Earth orbit.
CBS News, this is Doug Poling. The Space Shuttle Discovery has been sent into orbit a day late, but with no problems this time. Steve Young reports from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
Discovery got off the ground 70 thousandths of a second late after technicians managed to overcome the failure of a crucial electronics console in the firing room. One of the purposes of the 8-day mission is to put 2 communication satellites into orbit. That's practically old hat. But for the first time, they'll try on this flight to bring 2 satellites back from their worthless orbits so they can be refurbished and relaunched. One of the veterans in the 5-member crew, Dale Gardner, today celebrated his 36th birthday, NASA offering him Discovery's brilliant orange rockets as the biggest birthday candle ever. Gardner thanked the launch team on the ground.
That was a tremendous effort. We really enjoyed it. Thanks for the help. We'll see you later.
And Dr. Anna Fisher, a rookie who has a 1 and 4-month-old daughter, Kristen Ann, has become the first mother in space. Steve Young, CBS News, Kennedy Space Center, Florida.
CBS News, this is Mitchell Krauss. The Space Shuttle Discovery are nearing the end of their first sleep period and will soon fire a rocket to adjust their course in order to chase down 2 ailing satellites. They're due to be retrieved, if they can be, during 2 6-hour spacewalks which occur later in the shuttle mission. Nicaragua wants a UN meeting on its quarrel with this country. Moscow warns of invasion plans by Washington, and the shuttle prepares to swap satellites. Good morning, this is Reid Collins with the CBS World News Roundup. For the Discovery shuttle astronauts.
Well, we got your teleprompter messages, and we're just starting to get the cabin all set for another day of work.
The ambitious program of new satellites for old is getting underway, as Sue Davis of KTRH reports from the Johnson Space Center.
The work begins in earnest for the Discovery's 5-member crew today. Slated for this afternoon is the first of 2 satellite deployments. The crew is also performing a number of maneuvers to put Discovery into the same orbit as 2 satellites. The crew will retrieve and return to Earth for repair and eventual relaunch. Flight Director Jay Green in Houston maintains it's the time and not the procedures the crew must worry about.
The sequences themselves have all been done before. We've deployed satellites, we've rendezvoused before. The thing that becomes a trick here is that there's not much room to stub your toe as you go.
Those satellite retrievals will take place next week. Sue Davis for CBS News at the Johnson Space Center.
Antonio. CBS News, I'm Richard C. Hottler. Nicaragua. CBS News, I'm Douglas Edwards. 2 international. CBS News, this is Doug Poling. Despite fears expressed by U.S. officials that a Soviet
and rather news and comment. Pushed a glittering new communications satellite out of Discovery's cargo bay today. Crew member Joe Allen says the deployment went without any problems at all. The launch made room on the spacecraft for the rescue Monday of the first of 2 satellites stranded in the wrong orbit 9 months ago. The crew will deploy another satellite tomorrow. If you meet the qualifications, you could be the first teacher in space. NASA is now beginning the selection process to choose a full-time classroom teacher from an elementary or secondary school for a flight, perhaps as early as 1986. Helping NASA choose a teacher will be the Council of Chief State School Officers. The final selection will be announced on July 4th. KTRH News Time, 8:39.
CBS News, I'm Carol Pazewski. The people of Nicaragua the satellite of its current mission tomorrow. The first was successfully deployed without a hitch. The 2,700-pound device entering an orbit with a high point of about 22,300 miles. Monday, the Discovery attempts to rendezvous with the first of 2 stranded satellites. The plan is to retrieve them and bring them back to Earth for repairs. Secretary
2 degrees under clear skies in San Antonio, sunny and mild today.
The invasion fever is still running high in Nicaragua. The Kremlin and the Reagan administration taking the temperature on new arms control talks. Good morning, this is Neil Strasser with the CBS World News Roundup. Satellite launching again this morning. Bruce Hall has a report.
The word from this morning was ease away as the astronauts...
It's RV time at Ancira Motor Company's recreational vehicle.
TRH, Houston, News Radio 740 AM.
It's midnight.
CBS News, this is Paul Lockwood. It'll be wake-up time in a few minutes aboard the Discovery Space Shuttle. First thing on the agenda is the firing of the shuttle's maneuvering rockets to begin the final phase of the rendezvous with the wayward communications satellite. The actual retrieval to be made by astronaut Joseph Allen. Just how safe is all this? Well, that was the question put to NASA's Bill Durbing in Houston.
We are very careful about checking out the systems, and we are very, very confident he's going to work the way we planned it. We have another astronaut suited up. We also have that 50-foot Canadian arm, and either the arm or the second astronaut can be covered in case something goes wrong, they can't get back to the mother craft.
An attempt to recover a second stray satellite is to be made on Wednesday. More news in a moment.
The shuttle Discovery has reached the satellite it will try to retrieve. America's Catholic bishops call for a reordering of economic priorities. Good morning, this is Reid Collins with the CBS World News Roundup.
Visual on Palapa to the crest. Tally ho, great news.
The first space salvage effort is about to get underway, as Bruce Hall reports from Houston.
The Discovery astronauts have the wayward Palapa satellite in sight and are maneuvering to within 35 feet in preparation for the dramatic salvage attempt later this morning. Ever since it was launched on Thursday, the shuttle has been stalking the drifting communication satellite, chasing it 1.6 million miles, 64 orbits around the Earth. All of the activities this morning have been delayed about 20 minutes, but there have been no problems leading up to the rendezvous. Astronaut Joe Allen will leave the spacecraft soon, using his jet-powered backpack to first fly around the 9-foot-high satellite and then try to hook onto it and guide it toward the shuttle. The entire operation could take as much as 6 hours, and if it is successful, the process will be repeated again on Wednesday, when a Westar satellite, also in a useless orbit, is rescued. Bruce Hall.
CBS News, I'm Christopher Glenn. Astronaut Joe Allen, flying free with a jet backpack out of the shuttle Discovery's cargo bay, is bulldogging a wayward communications satellite. Sue Davis of Houston affiliate KTRH has the latest from the Johnson Space Center.
Like old-time cowboys, Discovery crew members have roped an errant satellite for return to Earth. Astronaut Joe Allen reports he has a good time in the satellite roping event.
Winch is broken over. Stop the clock. I've got it tied.
Allen stopped the slow spin of the satellite, and Anna Fisher inside the Discovery is now using the remote manipulator arm to maneuver the satellite over to the shuttle's cargo bay. Dale Gardner is waiting there to help secure it for the return to Earth. Sue Davis for CBS News at the Johnson Space Center.
CBS News, this is Jackie Judd. There has been a small snag in space. Spacewalking shuttle astronaut Dale Gardner is trying to make a final lasso around the Palapa satellite so it can be brought back into Discovery's cargo bay.
Houston, Discovery, we're going to let Dale talk. We got a problem here. Roger, go ahead. Okay, Jerry, here we go. The common bracket clamp will not fit on the satellite.
NASA says the crew has come up with a solution to the problem, but it is still a delicate maneuver, as Anna Fisher and Gardner found out.
I think it'd be easier if you just told me what you wanted relative to you.
That's sometimes harder for me to explain.
I can do either way.
Okay. What I want now is to be able to work in at an angle like this, see? Otherwise, the Omni will be punching me right in the belly here when I try to take the MRI on.
I understand.
The Palapa satellite needs to be brought back to Earth for repairs. A similar procedure will be carried out on another satellite on Wednesday. More news in a minute.
CBS News, I'm Richard C. Hotelet. Astronauts Joe Allen and Dale Gardner have a wandering satellite tethered, but getting it into the barn, the cargo hold of the Space Shuttle Discovery, has presented a problem. Sue Davis of KTRH has the story.
The spacewalk had been going better than expected, with astronauts Joe Allen and Dale Gardner running ahead of schedule in their attempt to retrieve the errant Palapa satellite. But as they prepared to attach a frame to the Palapa to help secure it to the shuttle, Gardner found he cannot clamp onto the frame because of a structure sticking out from the satellite.
It's not a piece of structure I can remove. It is massive. I've tried twisting, as you can imagine, every direction. I've tried forcing it on. It's within maybe an eighth to a quarter of an inch of making it. But unfortunately, close doesn't count with the common bracket.
So the Discovery crew has moved to Plan B, which is to hand berth the satellite into the shuttle's cargo bay. Allen and Gardner will try to maneuver it in themselves. Sue Davis for CBS News at the Johnson Space Center.
Has completed one of the key objectives of the current Space Shuttle mission. Bruce Hall reports.
Astronauts Joe Allen and Dale Gardner successfully completed their historic salvage mission by securing a wayward satellite in the cargo bay of the Space Shuttle.
All right, we got her.
It took about 4 hours, but could have been done quicker if the astronauts had not been forced to go to a backup plan and literally have to push the satellite into the shuttle by hand. They were not able to use the mechanical arm to hoist it in because they discovered a small section protruding from the top, making it impossible to grab the smooth-skinned satellite. The satellite will now be returned to Earth, repaired, and sent aloft again, possibly next year. Bruce Hall, CBS News, Johnson Space Center, Houston.
CBS News, I'm Carol Pazewski. Tank knew its options regarding a second satellite retrieval. 2 spacewalking astronauts successfully corralled the first satellite Monday, but banged it up a bit, wrestling it into Discovery's cargo bay 5 hours after their spacewalk began. The maneuver had to be done manually because of a problem preventing the use of the robot arm. NASA is hoping the mechanical arm can be used Wednesday for the second retrieval. The 2 satellites are to be returned to Earth when the shuttle lands Friday at Florida's Kennedy Space Center.
Nicaragua braces for the invasion George Shultz says isn't coming. Shuttle astronauts study better ways to gather satellites. Good morning. This is Reid Collins with the CBS World News Roundup. Is slowly closing in on its next target, the Westar satellite. Like the one retrieved yesterday, the Westar is in a low and useless orbit, and the plan is to retrieve it tomorrow morning. But the astronauts are reviewing some new procedures to avoid yesterday's wrestling match that took so long and so much effort to get the retrieved satellite stored in the cargo bay. The story from Houston and Bruce Hall.
The rescue effort will be similar to the successful recovery of the Palapa satellite yesterday. The astronauts are trying to determine if the Westar will also have objects protruding from the top that will prohibit the use of the mechanical arm and force them to bring the wayward satellite into the cargo bay by themselves. Mission Control discussed the options with the astronauts this morning.
We've got a lot less space available in the payload bay than we did yesterday, and it could really cause us some problems.
And astronaut Joe Allen said on yesterday's recovery, the sun presented problems.
The sun was always on my body and from the same direction, and my hands got warm. It never got to the point of being uncomfortable or where I was even thinking about stopping work.
The insurance underwriters are applauding the recovery, saying that it is vital to the survival of an industry that has already paid out over $300 million in losses. The underwriters hope to refurbish and resell satellites so they can be launched again, possibly next year. Bruce Hall, CBS News, Johnson Space Center, Houston.
CBS News, this is Paul Lockwood. Firing of the Space Shuttle's maneuvering rockets to start the final phase of rendezvous with a stranded communications satellite. This will be the second recovery operation in the mission. The first one ended successfully, although things didn't go exactly according to plan. NASA's Dave Alter.
They over-prepared, which made it easier when it finally did come about. I think they discovered that astronauts can work over long periods, although working in a 100% oxygen environment inside a suit does take its toll.
It's strictly circumstantial, but the Pentagon says there is evidence to indicate that Nicaragua may be planning an offensive against one of its neighbors, either El Salvador or Honduras.
CBS News, this is Charles Osgood. Astronauts Dale Gardner and Joseph Allen are at it again today.
We're out.
Gardner and Allen spacewalking at this moment, trying to repeat Monday's troubled but successful retrieval of a non-working communications satellite. Sue Davis of affiliate KTRH reports from the Johnson Space Center in Houston.
This is the second spacewalk for Discovery astronauts Joe Allen and Dale Gardner. This morning they will try to retrieve the ailing Westar satellite, although the procedure will be handled differently from Monday's rescue of the Palapa satellite. The failure of a special frame to fit Palapa forced Allen and Gardner to hand berth the satellite. Today they will make more use of Discovery's robot arm for the retrieval, with Allen perched on the end of the arm. Gardner this time has donned the back
Shuttle astronauts wrestle their second satellite in space. The administration wrestles a deficit arising around the White House. Good morning. This is Reid Collins with the CBS World News Roundup. The Allen and Gardner tag team is out of the space shuttle now, wrestling another wayward satellite toward the cargo bay.
Oh, well, look at that satellite. Oh.
Gardner speared the rotating barrel and was twirled around with it as the process of recapture began. The story from Mission Control and Sue Davis of KTRH in Houston.
Dale Gardner and Joe Allen are 2 hours now into their second spacewalk of this mission, this time to retrieve the Westar satellite. Gardner used the backpack to fly over to the Westar and then grabbed it with a special capture device.
Looking good, Dale. Going for toggle. Hey, toggle, they got it.
Since the special frame they brought won't fit the satellites, the astronauts this time are using the robot arm to berth the Westar, with Allen perched on the end of the arm. The spacewalk is set for 6 hours, but is expected to finish well within that time frame. Sue Davis for CBS News at the Johnson Space Center.
It's a minute past the hour.
CBS News, this is Charles Osgood. Talk about your wide-open spaces. Shuttle astronauts Dale Gardner and Joseph Allen, space cowboys, riding electronic mounts today, lassoing and hopefully very soon corralling a stray doggy of a satellite for return to the Big K Ranch, the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. KTRH's Sue Davis reports from the Johnson Space Center in Houston.
The shuttle astronauts are well on their way to rescuing their second satellite. The Discovery crew members are trying now to wrestle the Westar satellite into the shuttle's cargo bay.
Flight Director Randy Stone reports that the crew is about an hour ahead of the timeline, proceeding very well, and things have gone very smoothly this morning in the recovery of the Westar.
Dale Gardner used the jet backpack to fly out to Westar and then grab it with a special capture device. Joe Allen then perched on the end of the robot arm to help out.
Oh, you're finally coming up here to see me? You've been having fun, Dale.
Gardner and Allen will need a couple of hours more to stow Westar into its place on the Discovery. The robot arm is taking the place of the special frame that did not fit the two satellites being rescued on this mission. Sue Davis for CBS News at the Johnson Space Center.
CBS News, this is Judy Muller. The astronauts aboard Discovery have reeled in the second catch of the week. Sue Davis of CBS affiliate KTRH reports.
The Discovery crew is now 2 for 2. Astronauts Joe Allen and Dale Gardner have berthed the Westar, the second satellite the crew has rescued on this mission. Once again, it was Allen left holding the bag, or at least the satellite, as he perched on the end of the robot arm while Gardner prepared for the berthing.
How are you holding up there? I'm doing okay. Omni makes it easier, huh? Much easier. Okay. Well, we're not going to keep you up there too much longer. Promise you.
This job was accomplished in less time than expected. It took less time than rescuing the Palapa satellite on Monday. Sue Davis for CBS News at the Johnson Space Center.
CBS News, I'm Richard C. Hotelet. For Discovery, it is 2 in and none to go. A new high point in space shuttle performance. The story from Sue Davis of station KTRH.
Astronauts Joe Allen and Dale Gardner today retrieved and stowed the Westar satellite in the shuttle's cargo bay, next to the Palapa satellite recovered on Monday. Allen once again held on to the satellite, this time while perched on the end of the robot arm, while Gardner prepared it for berthing. Afterwards, Gardner was elated.
Fun. Like doing work for free.
The 2 satellites will be returned to Earth, where the motors that sent them into useless orbit will be replaced, and the satellites will likely be sent back up again. Sue Davis for CBS News at the Johnson Space Center.
Having completed the major point of this mission, the Discovery crew should have a lot to say when it holds a press conference with Earth tomorrow. The mission ends on Friday, with Discovery returning to its starting point, Cape Canaveral. Now this.
Allen and Dale Gardner are back inside the shuttle Discovery now. Their second try at picking a communications satellite out of orbit and getting it into the cargo bay, as much a success as the first.
The airlock is depressurized and all's well with the world. Roger that. Give them both a good handshake and a slap on the back. They did super jobs. Guess what? That beats it to it.
Today's maneuver posed fewer problems than the first. The crew was able to use the shuttle's long manipulator arm to winch the Westar 6 satellite aboard. The arm couldn't be used during the recovery of the Palapa satellite on Monday. It had to be wrestled into the cargo bay manually.
CBS News, this is Paul Lockwood. The mission will be kind of a tame one for the crew of Discovery. Final systems checks and cleaning up and stowing of gear in preparation for Friday's landing. Wednesday, though, was anything but routine, however, as the shuttle team succeeded in rescuing another wayward communications satellite from its improper orbit. There is plenty of fuel left on board the shuttle, enough to keep the spacecraft aloft for another 18 to 20 days. But according to Mission Control, the plan is to shed some of that fuel.
They're anticipating now dumping perhaps as much as 40% of the forward reaction control system fuel left aboard in order to achieve the proper balance for center of gravity. That's not a firm number, but it gives some indication of just how wide the fuel margins are aboard Discovery.
According to the Centers for Disease Control, the dioxin contamination of the Virginia military campground where the Boy Scouts held their 1981 jamboree was unlikely to have caused any harmful effects. Israel and Lebanon hold another meeting on withdrawal. Speaking of which, the Great American Smokeout begins again today, millions trying to quit. Good morning, this is Reid Collins with the CBS World News Roundup. This morning, a news conference in space. Dale Gardner asked about the decision to manhandle the second satellite retrieved by the crew this week.
Joe and I, after having moved the satellites around by hand in the bay, are fairly confident that given those same conditions, satellites of that size and spin rates and wobble rates not any larger than what we saw, that we probably could have grabbed them by hand also. I still think our decision for the second EVA was a good one. We went with what we knew was a proven technique and got the second satellite into the base successfully.
The next call expected up to the shuttle, that from President Reagan. CBS News, this is Doug Poling. It's a day of congratulated by President Reagan for retrieving 2 satellites in the first space salvage mission.
Joe, Dale, how did the space backpack work for you? I guess, I'm sure it would have been hard to retrieve those satellites without it. Mr. President, that manned maneuver unit worked perfectly for both Joe on the first EVA and for myself on the second. The docking with the satellite and capture was exactly as we had trained to in simulators on the ground. It was a real pleasure doing it. That's just great, and we were all keeping track, and everyone down here rooting and praying for you.
The astronauts are scheduled to land back at the Kennedy Space Center tomorrow morning. CBS News, this is Doug Poling.
It's 11 o'clock. CBS News, this is Mitchell Krauss. All mail.
How would you like to wake up to this? That's what the astronauts of the Space Shuttle Discovery heard at the end of their last night's sleep in space. Now the Discovery crew is beginning the final preparations for re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere and the landing schedule for the Kennedy Space Center in Florida in about 7 hours. Weather forecasters say conditions should be acceptable, although there's been a band of cloudiness and rain in the area. On board, the 2 ailing satellites the Discovery astronauts recovered in space. They were treated to a hero's welcome by their owners, along with the shuttle crew.
CBS News, I'm Bill Whitney. Forward to coming home. Those words from Mission Commander Frederick Houck as he and his fellow Space Shuttle astronauts prepare for landing at Cape Canaveral, Florida. Touchdown is scheduled for just about 3 hours from now. Inside Discovery's cargo bay are the fruits of the mission, 2 satellites recovered from their errant orbits. Bill Whitney, CBS News.
CBS News, this is Jackie Judd. Baby Fairy is scheduled to land 2 hours from now at the Kennedy Space Center, just about 3 miles from where it took off last week. The shuttle's cargo bay doors have been closed, protecting the crew and the 2 retrieved communication satellites. There's been an odd incident this morning near Kennedy. NASA's Jim Ball explains.
There was, in fact, a plane that took off from a nearby airport without a pilot aboard. However, we were also informed that there was only about 1.5 hours worth of fuel loaded into the aircraft. And as a consequence, it really is not of any concern to us in regards to its potential impact on the shuttle landing.
The pilot apparently was on the outside of the plane, turning the prop by hand when it took off. No one seems to know where the plane is. It was last seen headed toward the Atlantic Ocean. A white...
CBS News, this is Reid Collins. Triumph and tragedy. The shuttle sails for home, mission accomplished. But science fails in its mission for a tiny life.
Baby Faye died at 9 p.m. Her parents were with her as much as possible during this period and are receiving support from chaplains and the physicians.
The announcement from the hospital in Loma Linda, California, where the infant known as Baby Faye died last night, 3 weeks after the heart of a baboon was substituted for her own. Kidney failure set in and proved too much, and she succumbed at 9 Eastern Time. 1 hour from now, the Space Shuttle Discovery is due to be on the runway at the Kennedy Space Center. Mission ended and accomplished. The Space Shuttle doors were closed early today, and moments ago the crew got the final word on the deorbit rocket firings that's bringing them home.
Discovery Houston, a minute to LOS Petrus. Configure LOS. Have a good burn. We'll talk to you at Yargity at 42.
Okay, Nick. We're on the way home.
And we'll have more in a minute.
Discovery, I'm Christopher Glenn, CBS News at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Like a treasure ship of days of yore, the shuttle Discovery is coming home with booty in the hold. $70 million worth of 2 errant communication satellites, which the spacewalkers Joe Allen and Dale Gardner plucked from orbit day before yesterday and a couple of days before that. A dramatic and successful mission that even the astronauts themselves say they've been looking out in the cargo case, teaching themselves to make sure that they really did it, that they've got those satellites in the hold and they're bringing them home. Historic space first. They'll be taken off the shuttle on Saturday after the landing, which is expected in just a couple of minutes, and sent on out to California to a Hughes aircraft plant out there for refurbishing and eventually relaunch or redeployment into orbit. You might have just heard the 2 sonic booms which herald the arrival of the shuttle in the vicinity of Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center. We're trying to catch a glimpse of them now. Usually when those sonic booms sound, you can get an eyeball on the spacecraft, but so far we haven't been able to see anything. It's still quite early here. The sun is just barely up above the rim of the ocean at this point, and shining, of course, from east to west. The shuttle is approaching from the west, and we should be able to catch a pretty good glint off the skin of the spacecraft as, oh, there we have it now in sight. Yes, indeed. Coming down at a very steep glide path that they take much steeper than your commercial airliners do. If you had to land like that in a commercial jet, I have a feeling you'd be grabbing onto the edges of your seat to hold on and keep yourself secure, but they do it routinely with no problem whatsoever. Now, the procedure at this point, the craft is coming down. They will swoop over the runway, make a great left-hand turn, which will take them back out over the water and make about a 20-mile heading alignment circle, they call it. That circle will bring them back for a north-to-south approach to the Kennedy Space Center runway, 15,000 feet long, concrete, and flanked on both sides by trenches that are filled with alligators. This is, after all, the Cape Kennedy area is the middle of a wildlife refuge, so what they usually do is throw some helicopters out there, and they run up and down the runway a couple of times just before landing to scare away any of the wildlife which may have gotten out there and might interfere with it. Now the shuttle is coming down. We have an excellent view of it. We're way up on top of the vehicle assembly building where they put these launch vehicles and rockets together before they go up. And we have an excellent view. We're looking down at the runway, which is about 2 or 2.5 miles away. And the space shuttle at this point less than 5 miles from the end of the runway, coming down steadily. And when they get to the bottom of that glide path, they'll do their flare out, and it should be wheels down in, let's see, in about less than a minute now, it looks like. They're due to come swooping home triumphantly, no problems, everything going smoothly according to mission control, and this landing is getting to be a routine procedure. The weather here is just about the most fickle thing, and the thing that they constantly have to watch out for just before the landing deorbit burn is accomplished from the last revolution. And here they come now, really approaching the end of the runway, swooping down, flaring out. The wheels, the landing gear is down, and the spacecraft is now coming over the end of the runway, and they will be a few hundred feet down the runway before the wheels touch. We're looking for the puff of smoke that announces the landing. And there you are. We have touchdown. Cheers, and a beautiful sight as the shuttle comes swooping home. You can hear it as it rolls out on the runway.
Discovery now rolling out, runway 15 at the Kennedy
Discovery has just touched down on the 15,000-foot concrete one-wood runway here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The rollout is almost completed now. The shuttle slowing as it rolls down about 2/3 of the way down the runway, and it will be wheel stopped and engine stopped in just a few seconds. So we just heard Mission Control there say that their entry was, their landing rather, was 4 seconds off, well after a journey of 3.3 million miles. That's bad a record to have indeed. So they're home. Commander Rick Houck and the pilot David Walker, the two now famous spacewalkers Joe Allen and Dale Gardner, and the robot arm operator, mission specialist Anna L. Fisher. And 2 satellites in the hold, taken from orbit by those daring and dramatic spacewalks a couple of days ago. They'll be taken off the shuttle and sent back to California for refurbishing, and eventually they will be sent back into space for redeployment. A huge savings for the insurance companies who have been paid out about $180 million in claims on those 2 things while they were drifting in their useless orbits. And it really gives some flesh and muscle to the space program. They are a space trucking company, they call themselves, and they proved that they can put them up there, and now they can bring them back. So Shuttle Discovery is home, everybody is safe. The offloading operations now begin for the satellites, for the astronauts rather, and their recovered satellites, and a job well done on this Shuttle 51B mission. This is Christopher Glenn at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
Baby Faye dies 3 weeks after the baboon transplant. The Shuttle Discovery comes home after 8 days in space. Good morning, this is Reid Collins with the CBS World News Roundup. Discovery's back on terra firma this morning. The Aladdin mission of new lamps for old accomplished with a flourish. Christopher Glenn reports from the Kennedy Space Center.
The shuttle came home to a flawless landing at the Florida Space Center. The cheers in Mission Control were perhaps a little louder than usual because of the success of the dramatic operation to pick 2 communication satellites out of useless orbits and bring them home. The cheers of those who gathered to watch the landing were perhaps a bit louder, too. NASA and the astronauts who did the job are very excited about the success of the salvage mission. It's a clear demonstration to would-be paying customers that the shuttle can deliver both ways. And the ease with which the spacewalkers Joe Allen and Dale Gardner manhandled the huge satellites, which weigh more than a half a ton on the ground, has opened a few eyes too, pointing the way to the day when construction workers will be building space stations in orbit. Christopher Glenn, CBS News, at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.